Hey everybody, welcome to Tales from a Professional Nerd, episode 23. I'll be your nerd today and every day, Brian CP Steele. So it's been a good week. We talked last week about kind of how to do good, how to set up for hopefully doing good sessions and things at conventions. And I got a decent amount of feedback on that. But this week, I want to talk a little bit about the life of Bryan as we always do, um, and then I'm going to jump into it's kind of a related topic from last week, but it's a more serious topic. That has popped up a little bit in a lot of the forums and a lot of the Facebook groups and things over the last couple weeks that I kind of want to touch on and get into for multiple reasons. And not just because I think it's a good topic to talk about, but I think that the initial delivery of that topic can put off certain people and certain gamers, especially the older minded ones. And I think that it might behoove people to do a kind of a walkthrough of what the whole situation is. But before we get into that, let's talk about me. All right, so let's see. This week, I officially got myself lined up with Big Child Creatives. I am now. There's not really a name for my position, so I'm calling myself their U.S. agent, as that they are a company based out of Madrid, Spain. Um, I am, aside from trying to orchestrate, game development and game design and things with them, which is the ultimate goal. I am also going to, and I've already started helping, trying to find ways to get their products, their existing products, into stores. Um, they are currently they create. They're an amazing company full of artists that are just brilliant sculptors and painters and illustrators. It's wowing. Multiple Crystal Brush, multiple Golden Demon winning. I mean, they're just it's so their stuff is just unreal. Um, and they sell a lot of miniatures that are more designed for artistic value, for painting competitions, or um, in some cases, they're amazing like centerpieces and dioramas or things like that. They also have a line of models that are and they're in the right scale for Blood Bowl, that are very similar to uh, the same kind of artistic quality that their other figures have, just on a smaller scale, and that would make amazing, kind of unique stand-ins for your Blood Bowl team. If you don't want your ogre to be the same ogre that every other ogre is, you could grab one of the big child, these bruisers, and wow your friends with, be like, wow, where'd you get that? Big Child Creatives, because they're awesome. Boom, 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 boom. Um, but yeah, so I officially signed on with them to be their U.S. agent to try my best and my damnedest to get them into some distribution chains and into your various retailers. Um, what I would love from you, from you, my fun-loving gaming fans and viewers and subscribers, hopefully, that you would, if you have a game store, um, or a gaming club, or some place that would want to offer these miniatures or these miniature lines, or these hobby products, um, to reach out and touch me. Basically, either throw me a line on Facebook or send me an email to Bryan, Bryan, at ursasden.com, ursasden.com. Um, or leave a comment here, and then I'll reach out to you, or reach out to that store, Um, it is basically what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and get Big Child a decent footprint in the U.S. and anyone else that wants to deal with me, um, because I think it will behoove these stores to have a good working relationship with Big Child and the distributors and such, when we start coming out with some games, because I know that is kind of one of our future goals, and one of the reasons why Jose has hired me on is because we want to take a look at maybe making some Big Child Creatives games in the future, hopefully using some of their amazing art and some of those beautiful sculpts, um, or similar therein, to make games that'll hopefully leave a mark on gamers everywhere, as is really my whole goal in everything that I ever do. Um, so that's been a lot of this week. A lot of phone calls, a lot of internet research. Still working with Crafty Games on retainer to help them with a as yet named game line in the near future. So I'm doing a lot of research reading, a lot of kind of jotting down a bunch of notes of what I think I want to do. And honestly, I've been looking into some of the old stables of old freelancers and things to reach out when it's time. So there's been a lot going on this week. It's been a good week. I'm still doing some painting commission, get some stuff done for some clients, and made finished a sculpt that I'm super excited to start reproducing. Hopefully, I'll sell some on eBay, but also um, I think they're going to make a debut at a show soon. At the next convention that I'm getting to go to is Dragonfall. I've mentioned here before. I'm going to run a couple of events and play in some events at Dragonfall. But one of the events that I'm definitely going to be playing in is there's I believe Ricky Estrada is running a charity Dark Age game. I know it's a Dark Age tournament, but I think it might even be for charity. I'm not sure, but I am very eager to bring my force with me and to go throw down, because last couple of conventions that Ricky and I have run into each other or plan to run into each other, I've just been too busy and there's just been too much going on, and I have missed out on playing some Dark Age um, with the old friends and fans, and I'm not going to let that happen this time. So I'm bringing some models that people have never seen before. Some sculpts that have only recently been available on the eBay, and hopefully, yeah, I don't think I'll do very well because I'm doing style over substance. But sometimes if it's for charity, they're the ones that win anyway. I don't care whether or not I win or lose. So yeah, Dragonfall's right around the corner. Super excited about that. If you can make it out to that show, I'm jazzed. I'm hoping that I will be able to, as I keep saying every time I do a convention, is I want to try and maybe get live from the show or record something from the show. Dragonfall might be a little easier for me to record at the show, or at least like record segments at the show, and then I'll patch it together when I get back, if I can't go live. I don't know. I honestly, I'm not 100% sure. Um, so, you'll probably note in the last couple of weeks, or the last week anyway, I was ecstatic about the Armor Class 10 apparel sponsorship of the show, and which is awesome and is still ongoing. But they're due to the erroneous misjudgment of postal timing. I don't have a new shirt for the week this week. I have a shirt that I bought. This is not an Armor Class 10. It's still a great shirt. If you're a Monster Squad fan, Wolfman's got nards. But it's still a great shirt. It's just not an Armor Class 10 shirt. So I'm not this week. I am not peddling any particular shirt for them. But I do think that you should still bounce over their website and take a look and see if there's anything that jumps out at you. If as long as the U.S. Postal Service doesn't devour my package, um, I will have the official like shirt of the week will start next week. All right, let's see what else. What else do we have going on? What did I do this week? Got hung out with my kids, played a bunch of Borderlands 3. God, I love Borderlands. It's such it speaks to me in so many different ways. It's a fun release. It's a way for me to blow off steam and kind of laugh and chuckle at the comedy being happening on the screen without completely taking me out of without completely taking me out of the scope of the game. It's a great game. If you're into first person shooters, especially ones that are um, just chaos incarnate, check out Borderlands 3 if you can. Which I have to make sure that I say that I'm not a sponsor or they're not sponsoring me or I wasn't paid to say that. That's just my opinion. Um, because that would be amazing if Gearbox would like reach out to me and be like, "Hey Brian, why don't you be our professional nerd?" But that won't happen. That's not let's not say that's a thing. Um, what else? What else? What else? What else? Earlier, so last week, a few weeks ago, actually, God, it's probably almost been about 2 months, I think. I mentioned being on a podcast, definitely a rated R podcast, um, called Dungeons with Dudes, where it's a bunch of dudes that get together and play various role playing games, um, as part of the Journey into Comics podcast network. Um, the I finally got the address to where those initial episodes were. Um, so I'm gonna link. I'll put those in the description so you guys can listen to us be absolutely crazy, starting out our game of Monster of the Week. A fun little system that's highly narrative, uh, minimal dice rolls involved as far as like what you're doing. It's a lot of role playing, and in this instance, it's a lot of silly, crazy role playing. Um, we went a little crazy, and we made crazy characters, and my buddy put us in a 1980s feel, um, fake California podunk town where we will be hunting down monsters. And we've recorded at this point an episode 0 and episode 1, and I believe episode 2. I know we just did 2 last weekend, but I don't think that's up on their website yet. I'm going to put the links to episode 0 and 1 in the description, so you guys can click on that, have a good time, laugh along with us, because it for a game that I went into it that all right, my mindset's here, and this is the kind of character I'm gonna be, and we're gonna take it serious, and it's gonna be deep, and it's gonna be dark, and it's gonna be. Sometimes you sit down with a bunch of guys or gals or whatnot, and your initial plan goes right out the window, and it becomes just crazy. And once we realize that it's going to be a crazy game and that we're going to be crazy characters and we're going to just be giddy with silliness. I mean, there's a couple of cool serious moments, but overall, it's a pretty goofy game. But we all have that expectation, and we're all having a blast. So if you want to listen, they're not long episodes. They're roughly about as long as what I do here, of us hunting monsters as our various eccentric selves. So you should check it out. Dungeons with Dudes. They not to mention I know that they do a couple of other really cool, like just straight up D&D. Like I think one of their adventures they're doing right now is the Castle Ravenloft book adventure, and I expect, as things progress, I may very well be doing a little more role playing over there. Hopefully, get some D&D, some more serious stuff, not the slapstick, goofy Monster of the Week that we're doing right now. Um, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how much time I can commit to that sort of thing. As now that life is starting to normalize a little for the Bryan. So And then the other thing that I've been gearing up this week, aside from doing the recordings and hang out with family and stuff, um, is I have been starting to make my NPC and PC lists for the sessions at Dragonfall and the adventures at GaryCon. GaryCon's not, although it's not until March. I've got a lot of time before, in between here and GaryCon, to get all these characters done and get all their interactivity fixed, and weave my web of lies and deception. Um, but the it doesn't hurt to start, and it gets me into that kind of that creative mode where I can crank out a character and then be like, all right, cool. How do I want this character to interact with the next guy? Do I want this guy to be different? Do I want, is this guy going to be the stereotypical, fighter guy on the surface, or do I want to make him weird? So we'll see where all that stuff goes. But that's a lot of what I've been doing in between all these other responsibilities, is cranking out some of these guys for GaryCon and for Dragonfall. I'm excited. Brushing up on my Shadowrun Sixth World game knowledge. Whereas I know the narrative of the world really, really well, the game system itself, the new system, I am not 100% familiar with, and I need to get familiar with, because at Dragonfall, I'm running a Sixth World game with our novella characters. So I need to make sure that I know what I'm doing. Yeah, so speaking of, and this is actually a pretty good lead in. Let me take a drink real quick. Speaking of, so I'm talking about a lot of convention games. I'm talking about the monster of the week with the guys that I'm running, that I'm hanging out with over at Dungeons with Dudes. So Dungeons with Dudes is definitely a rated R, or for mature audiences only, podcast. Because there's a lot of language and a lot of phrases that get thrown back and forth. We and they do as much as they can to keep it from being, too graphic, or too, kind of pushing that line of good taste in some instances. But it is still something that, when you go into a podcast like that, you have to realize that, oh, hey, I'm opening these doors. It's like if you walk into a horror movie, this is something, what you might be able to see. If you are going to watch a Disney flick, guess what? You're not expecting a bunch of beheadings or grisly descriptions. So fast forward that to convention gaming. A lot of times at convention gaming, you don't know who you're going to sit down with. You don't know the players. You don't know the game master. But as a game master, most specifically, you probably do not know what you had to write your plot. You had to set up your characters. You have to know your audience, the people who you're going to be interacting with, the people who frankly paid to be there, to be part of this event. And the last thing you want is to do something or say something or set up a scene or set up an instance that is going to rob them of their enjoyment. Which brings me to today's actual topic, the consent in gaming. Now, I know a lot of people hear that, and there's a lot of old school gamers. Hell, there's a lot of new school gamers. There's just a lot of gamers in general that hear that and immediately want to throw their hands in the air and be like, "Oh, snurber, snowflakes, and snurber, social justice, whatever." What this is, honestly, is a way for you to try and craft and create the best game for the people that you're running. For those people. Don't think of it as a gateway, or a, oh man, they're hemming me in because I can't do all the stuff I want. Well, yeah, but that's society. That's That's everything. That's how real life works. And in an instance where you're trying to create something that's going to be entertaining and fun for everybody involved, it makes sense to have some guidelines, to have some sort of lines drawn in the sand, lines of understanding. And that's what this whole thing is. Well, a couple weeks ago, uh, the wonderful people over at Monte Cook Games, specifically Sean Reynolds and Shanna Germain, um, they crafted a pamphlet, basically a free little booklet. It's like 13 pages long, I think, give or take. Sounds about right. About 14 pages long. That is called Consent in Gaming, and they made it free for anybody who wants to go to their website and download it, and it's a free PDF. And I'm going to put the description of it in my uh, what am I talking about? Oh, in the description of the video, so that way you guys, for people who are interested, even just taking a look at what I'm talking about, you can click on that, download it. I mean, hell, if you want, pause this right now, pop out to the description, click the link there, download it, print it out, open it up, or whatever, and then play again so you can kind of walk through, because I plan today's episode is basically to walk through what this actually means, to give my fellow gamers out there a realistic look at what Shanna and Sean and Monte Cook Games were trying to do here, because it is not that they are trying to take the teeth out of gaming, or that they are trying to soften all of our D&D games out there so everybody's using wiffle ball bats, or make it so nobody's feelings are ever hurt ever. That's not what they're trying to do here. And we're going to walk through this pamphlet today on my show, because I think that it is important to discuss the best ways to make games for your gamers feel to make it better for them. And sometimes that requires some negotiation. Sometimes it requires some sacrifice. Sometimes it requires some narrative tooling. And this little pamphlet, this booklet is really good at that. It's a good tool to help you with that. If you want to rename it something else, call it a guide to narrating, or a guide to your group's narrative, or whatever. Because if the word consent is making you hostile and you're like, oh God, I hate the fact that I've got to ask my players to do things, then maybe it's a situation where that's just that word's making that, it's rubbing you the wrong way, because you don't like the idea of being told what to do. You don't like the idea of being penned in on your creative process. But again, that's not what this is about. What this is about is to try and help create the best gaming experience for everyone sitting at that table. The person, or the person and persons that are sitting at that table with you, everybody there, their goal, unless you play, Frank, I'm gonna drop I'm pushing that PG-13. Unless you play with an asshole, everybody at that table wants the game to be good. They want it to be fun. They want it to be entertaining. They want to spend those 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours together with everyone enjoying themselves. And then when the game is over, wanting to come back to do it again. That's the whole point of this. And this little booklet that they've put together, most specifically, the thing at the very end, which we'll go through, is it is really, I think it's a helpful tool. Do I think that it should be a necessity, like that every game master ever needs to use these sorts of things? No. I think there's a certain amount of common sense. For instance, so I run a Vampire Fifth Edition Dead. I run a Vampire Fifth Ed game for my close friends and some of my playtesters here in my local area. And a lot of these guys I've known for years and years and years and years, um, and have played in many, many games with. I know, generally speaking, even probably more so, more than general. I know some specifics that I can push a lot of visceral horror on these guys because I know they can take it. I know that that's not going to bug them. Uh, I don't ask them specifics, but after a session, if one of them came to me and said, "Hey, today's stuff got a little real for me. You know, it got a little deep, a little gutsy." Then I know that I'd back it off. You know, I'd be like, "All right, cool." You know, I'm not really gonna be like, "Oh, toughen up." You know, it's that's their opinion. If they didn't enjoy that scene, then it's my responsibility to hopefully adjust. Um, so part of where this came from is so not like where it came from me specifically is because I'm gearing up to run these convention games. And in a very recently, I partook in a Call of Cthulhu game at Gen Con, and I had a blast. I had a great time. But the character I was given, we all chose our characters kind of roughly at random, kind of like we had a picture and a name. And it's like, you get to be Biff, you know. The character that I was playing, you know, the game master went all out. He had like pages of stuff on every character, and huge long histories of all these things that, you know, make you tick and stuff that'll never come into a regular game for the most part. Um, for instance, the character I was playing, I think I've talked about it before. I was playing a FBI trained agent serial killer, basically Dexter, but in the FBI. Well, I didn't go into it anymore, but they on my character sheet, it wasn't that I was just a serial killer. I was also a serial rapist. And for me personally, I'm not going to play that up at the table. I mean, like that's bad form for me. And while it's an interesting little tidbit for you to point out that my guy is a sexual, you know, not even deviant, just monster, it's not something that I think I would ever want to try and portray. And that character has been kind of rattling around in my subconscious quite a bit, thinking about today's episode, because I think that kind of character is the exact reason why this source book exists. Yeah, sure, you know, we're playing a very mature game, and you sit down at the table and the game master says straight up, "Hey, I'm going to be doing some stuff, and my job is to make you uncomfortable." And it's one thing to his job to make us feel, you know, ooky and uncomfortable. It's another thing for him to potentially draw on legitimate fears or legitimate um, backgrounds that people may have dealt with. You know, luckily I have never personally had to deal with that in my life. So getting this character, you know, I was able to just sort of set it off to the side and, you know, focus on the serial killing aspect of things, which, you know, that's not better, but it did allow me to basically gloss over the fact that there were, you know, two female players at the table with me, one of which is a friend of mine from way back, you know, that I've known her forever, and I could probably play a real honest monster with her, and I think that she could probably handle that. But the other player that was there is a complete stranger, and as soon as I read that in my little bio, I was like, yeah, that's not going to come out. That's not going to happen. You know, not in deed or in word or in allegory. It's just not happening because I have no idea what this wonderful person who I'm playing with, this new friend that I'm making at a convention, this new player that is sitting down next to me. I don't know what she's had to deal with. I don't know what she's okay with. I don't know at all. So I basically just have to take the cues from the game master and play my character to the best of my ability. And yeah, I was a scumbag and I was a monster, but I wasn't that kind of monster. I wasn't really going to I was going to press that. It was bad form in my opinion. And that interaction has been rolling around a lot in my head ever since this whole consent in gaming thing has popped up. That combined with the fact that I'm gearing up for these, running all these convention games, I am. And I'm going to be running a Shadowrun game on the regs at a local store. So these are the things that have kind of been going through my head, is that I don't want to be painted as the game master who, came to the table and, these players never want to come back because of the horrible stuff that's happened. So when this source book, this pamphlet thing, when this came out, I grabbed it and I started flipping through it, and I realized that while I don't think that it is a necessity in every game, I don't think that it's something that you have to have, or as a player, I refuse to play in a game that doesn't do it. I think that's just as hard nosed and kind of jerk assy to be like, well, if you're not going to ask me about my consent levels, I don't want to play in your game. I think that there is definitely a nice middle ground, and while I will probably include the actual form when as we walk through this, the very end, there's a really nice questionnaire that takes about 2 minutes to fill out that I think would be great at conventions to give me while I'm getting everything squared away and you're getting ready for your character anyway. I think it's a good idea just to maybe have it available. And if a player just looks at it and says, I'm not filling this out, bring it on, whatever, that's their way of saying that, nothing's really going to make them crazy, nothing's really going to bother them. And frankly, if, they walk away from the table because something happened, it is on them for not telling you. You asked, that you put that form in there and you asked them. I'm not trying to say it's, protects against, bad gamer litigation or something like that. That's not the case. But it does mean that, as this becomes a little more of a normal thing, is that other games, when people go to conventions and go, hey, I played in Bryan's Ravenloft game and, some pretty gnarly stuff happened, but when it came to the giant room full of, I don't know, giant baby eating spiders, I don't even know where I can go with this. But, I had mentioned that I was not keen on it, and he was cool with kind of narrating my way through it or avoiding the deep spider descriptions because of my arachnophobia or whatever. Again, I'm just kind of reaching into a grab bag and finding stuff. But I think that you want people to have a good time, and there's nothing wrong or weak or social justicey or whatever, snowflakey or whatever you want to put that stupid title on it, but asking your players what's cool and what's not. And as a player, it's okay to say, hey, I'm not cool with rape scenes. I'm not okay with, you don't know my life. I'm not okay with discussion, the any kind of abuse of children, and in some instances that very well could cause the game master to do some adjusting to their plot, or because there are some old fantasy tropes of the Pied Piper whisking children away in the streets with magic. There's a I can't remember which one it is, but there's a written one of the Ravenloft adventures way back when is got a bunch of zombie children in an attic. Because all the kids that have been stolen throughout the whole village, and they've been zombified because one of them had like a zombie puppy, or basically somebody had some kind of magic item artifact thing that they kept sharing with all their friends, and eventually the whole town's kids turned into these horrible, evil zombie orphans. And that might be something that triggers some people, and I'm avoiding trying to use that word because I know a lot of people hear that word and go, roll their eyes and, oh, triggered, and memes, and it's really the only word that counts. Like, I'm not, I would never use that as a defense mechanism, be like, please, this triggers me. But if the word works for what's happening to someone, just go with it. You're not in their shoes. You're not dealing with what they're dealing with. Move on. Try and make things better. All right, so let's take a look at this, because I've given you now the whole kind of where my brain has been, and what I've been thinking about ever since this whole consent in gaming thing came to the forefront. And now I do want to real quick, and I'm gonna post this on Sean and Shanna's when this episode goes live. I'm gonna post this on Sean and Shanna's Facebooks and Twitters and things, because I want them to know that this is. I think this is important, and I think they've done a good thing here, and what they've created. I'm gonna go through this, and while there's probably gonna be some segments that I go, okay, I can skip this. I want them to know that I appreciate the time that they put in to make a free product. This was not an insignificant amount of work to put together and word right. And I saw in the credits page that my girl Darcy Ross helped them put it together to make it sound right and sound the way it should. So I'm probably gonna reach out to Darcy too. Darcy played in my Gen Con charity Spelljammer game and did amazing. She's a wonderful human being, and I'm gonna reach out to her as well with this to say that, good on you guys for putting this together. Again, different varying levels for what people need to use this for, but I'm glad that someone decided to take that step. Does that make any sense? I think so. I'm asking a camera to, I guess, put in the comments. All right, so basically it's got this, it starts off, it's got the fancy cover page, and then it goes into the consent to gaming that basically talks about how a lot of what I just said is that role-playing games should be fun for everybody, and there's different levels of fun and not fun, and that the gaming groups should kind of decide what is safe to use at the table, what is okay and what isn't based off of that particular group. It goes into a lot of reasoning behind it. There's, it talks about how, sometimes their, player just doesn't like something. They might not have some, don't try and dig deeper and try and solve your gamer problems. Sometimes it might just not, this is just not something that they want to deal with while they're gaming, that sort of thing. Nobody really has to, it's actually put in here, nobody has to explain why they're not giving that consent. Again, I think because the terminology, a lot of this that's in this, the message is amazing, and it is good, and it is designed to try and make all role-playing gaming groups better. I think some of the wording is a little specific, and it's a little worded on the safe side, which again, if this is what you're trying to create, I understand that. For me personally, in a lot of my gaming groups, I don't think that I would need to get specific consent for every single thing that I would be talking about. there's a bullet point here that says the default answer is no. Um, I think that is true for most situations. But I think that if you are playing in, let's say, yeah, keep using Ravenloft. Oh, I'm going to sneeze. Is it alone? It's alone. Um, if you're playing in a game that is like Call of Cthulhu, which is visceral, mental torture, twisted horror, thriller horror, or if you're in Ravenloft, which is old school monster movie horror, I think there are certain things that I don't want to use the term and sound. I don't want to say, well, consent is assumed, because that sounds awful. Um, but I do think that if you sit down at a table that is going to be a Ravenloft game, and the Ravenloft game and the name of the chronicle is, Rise of the Spider Werewolves or Rise of the Mummy Queen or whatever, that you're gonna know. You have to know going into it that there's gonna be some horror that's going to take place here. There's going to be, you know, where you might want to discuss the level of that horror and that graphic nature of things. That it's going to happen. And to think that and to think otherwise is a little naive. Um, but that does not mean that if those clues aren't there, if that situation isn't what's being presented, that you shouldn't assume that, hey, maybe I should find out if everybody's cool with what I'm going to do before I do it as a game master, or even as a player. Sometimes I know in my past history, I've loved playing evil characters hidden in a group of good guys, so I can do all the gnarly, nasty things behind everyone's back. But it doesn't mean that I want to play the comedian in The Watchmen. It doesn't mean that I want that on screen. It means that I might pass a note to the game master that says, hey, my assassin is going to sneak upstairs and deal with the family who lives here off camera. Die rolls if you want, but let's not make a big deal out of it. That's a way to deal with it. Whereas if I was a blunt spotlight player, and I'm like, I don't care, I'm gonna run. I look at the table and say, all right, well, while you guys are sleeping, I'm gonna run upstairs and stab all the kids. That might be something that people want you to ask them about first. Leave it in the hands of the game master. All right, so there's a little bullet point section that says important things about consent. And again, a lot of these, there's paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs, but there are a few things that I think that are just solid things to know. And then these are good ones. It says you decide what's safe for you. Duh. Like you can't. No one's going to speak for you, and you shouldn't expect to speak for someone else. Now this goes back to the whole default answer is no. I get it. I understand what they mean. I think that there should be like an asterisk next to that says, you also do know what you're getting into based off of the information that you have been given. If you haven't given any information, well, then yeah, of course. It doesn't matter why consent wasn't given. That's absolutely true. If you're not okay with something, you're not okay with something. Just be not okay with it. Nobody has to explain why they're not consenting. Okay. I mean, you'll probably get questions why, but that doesn't mean that you have to give them an answer. You can be like, it's just not my thing, or I don't really want to go into it. Move on. There might not be a reason why, and that's totally true. Again, they could just be like, I don't feel like dealing with that at this game. There is a spectrum of consent for each topic. That's true. And we get into that a little further, is that there's varying levels of how okay are you with the idea of it even happening? Or are you okay with it happening on camera? Are you okay with it happening off camera? Are you okay with it happening to your character? There's, of course, there's a spectrum. Uh, next bullet point is it's not up for debate. I think, okay, it's not up for debate. I don't like ultimatums between gamers. I'm not a fan, but I do think that in this instance, because what is being debated is whether or not whether or not that is going to make you unhappy at the table. Unless you're debating because you don't know, and if you don't know, then that falls under the spectrum of consent. That falls under that whole, well, let's try and see if I'm cool with the way you're going to describe stuff. They can always change their mind about what they are or aren't consenting to. Duh. I mean, like, I hate the duh, but that makes perfect sense. It's, you might decide to get over that, or on that particular day, you're like, I'm fine with anything, just rock and roll. And anyone is allowed to leave an uncomfortable situation at any time. That's absolutely true, and that's true. That should be true in any instance. Now, hopefully, as a game master, if one of your players is like, "Hey, I gotta bounce," this is getting too much for me, or whatever, that maybe you'll change gears or try and keep them at the table by making things better. Not like by guilting them or anything like that, but try, be like, "Hey, whatever's going on, if there's anything I can do to fix it to keep you here, then let's do that. If not, we'll take care of your character. I'll be in touch after the game. Don't make things worse by trying to make them feel bad because they don't want to be there. If they want to be there, let them be on their way." All right, let's go through a couple more pages. So there's a section here for no words and go words, which is a nice way of basically saying that you have safe words of, hey, this isn't cool with me, or this one can be, this scene's fine, but maybe the next one isn't. I don't know if that's, I don't know. I can't think of a situation where I would need that. I would hope my players would be able to explain, hey, raise a hand, be like, this is getting a little messed up. But I could see, especially in a situation where you've got soft-spoken players or players that are sharing the table with more socially dominant players, they may not want to rock the boat. So they, come up with this, no word situation, or maybe you just write it down in a snip of paper and pass it to your game master. Be like, not okay, or whatnot, or hey, I need a pause. Okay, now this is one of those things that whereas I love what they've done here. This particular thing is not my shtick. So they've got a whole page dedicated to the X card. And basically, they've said that the player has created, or the game master, whoever's created, a physical representation, or like an index card or a note or something that's got a big red or black X on it that basically they can hold up as a gesture to, I don't want to be part of this. And this falls into the category of no one should want to make you feel uncomfortable at the table, but you also should keep in mind your actions and reactions can be affecting others at the table as well. And I don't know, me personally, I think having a giant card or something that you like, flash card auction style at the table is going to be disruptive to the other players, and I think that you'd be better off making sure that you've got a better situation, a better mode of communication with your game master. If hey, I'm not okay with this, than a flashcard. It just seems that's going to possibly cause that's gonna cause issues with other gamers. And if it turns out to be used constantly, like, no, I'm not okay with this, I'm not okay with this, I'm not okay with this, then maybe that game isn't for them. You know, that maybe you should run a separate type of game for them, or reevaluate the whole player group, the whole group as a whole, because this is obviously not the right kind of atmosphere that they want to be in. So I'm not a big fan of the X card idea. Maybe some groups will be like, it's better than that player speaking out, because I can just sort of, I realize, hey, I'm treading in dangerous water. I don't want to go there. I don't know. That's just me. So then the pamphlet continues on to talk around. Yeah, I'm actually going to read a quick quote. This is a good quote. I like this. Okay, and it says it's from your best game ever. Obviously, it's from someone's best game ever, but all right. It says, you have to be able to be casual around the other people in your game group. If you have to always keep your guard up or always worry about what someone will say, it's really hard to have fun. You need the freedom to tell jokes and say silly things because, of course, those things are a big part of role-playing games. And at the same time, you have to feel that no one is going to say something that makes you feel uncomfortable. We need to be willing to recognize when someone just makes a mistake, just like we want them to be able to handle our own mistakes gracefully. But I'm referring to more than just a rare, insensitive gaffe. Sometimes there will be someone in a group who just holds different beliefs than you, just like in any group of people in life. And just like in other aspects of our lives, some of those beliefs might be downright offensive or make you feel unsafe. And no role-playing game is worth that. I love that paragraph. That sums up a whole lot of what I feel about this whole consent thing. Is we want the gaming groups to be good. We want the gaming groups to be awesome. And if everybody's having a good time, then we're doing the right thing. If something happens and there's a little hiccup, okay, forgive them and move on. If that hiccup becomes a series of hiccups, well, then yeah, we probably have an issue. Which leads us into the next section here, which is the recovering from consent mistakes. Basically, recovering from when either the game master or a player or somebody has pushed it too far and has screwed up. It talks about how, aftercare. So aftercare and checking in, this is important. And this is so something that I've done with my role-playing games pretty much forever, for as far back as I can remember, is at the end of every game session, we always ask a set number of questions. And these questions are how you earn some of your experience, maybe gain inspirations or clues or whatever. But the questions vary from things that happened in the game. But one of the questions has always been, what is something that I as a game master did right or need to change? And that has been a big part of what makes me into the game master that I am, because I can take those little notes. And as a game master, I got to take their criticism because I want them to have fun. I want to be like, if they're like, ugh, this was way too much talking and not enough combat, I'll make a note that maybe at least next session I throw in a couple of conflicts because they need it, or whatnot. And that's part of this whole checking in and aftercare thing, is to make sure that your players know what's up, and that you as a game master, you know what you're doing, you know whether or not you're doing a good job, and you give your players a chance to tell you if you're doing the wrong thing. Let's see what else. And then we get into the checklist. And the checklist, I think, is probably the most important. Yeah, all the paragraphs and all the descriptions, and that's awesome. That's good stuff. But I think the consent checklist is easily the most important thing that we have in this little pamphlet. And I'm going to go through it because it is a good idea to have to know what your players are into and not into. And I think that is partly because you want to create the best story and best environment for them. And the way this is set up, all right, I'm going to hold this up real quick. It's the last page in the little pamphlet. So when you have this PDF, you can just print the final page a dozen times or whatever. And it's got, all the stuff you fill out for your character, but then it's also got green, yellow, and red for each of these topics. And there's a ton of topics on here. They were really thorough in making sure what we have under as far as the all the various stuff that might make people not enjoy your game. So it starts off the GM name, obviously that would be the whatever game master is in this thing. The player name, and it says or leave blank. Now, I understand why they left that on there, because not all players want to necessarily tell the people around them what their fears and what they would rather do this anonymously. The only issue I have with that is that most gaming areas or gaming groups are 5, 6, 7 people, and it seems like maybe being anonymous in a group of 6 is going to be hard to do, especially if no one else does it. I don't know. Just see, maybe if this is something that you keep on record for the greater good, the greater game. I don't know. I don't know why I would ever leave it blank. I would want my players, or I would want my game master to know what specifically I'm looking to avoid, or as we'll see down here, that I'm looking to be into. The planned game theme. Now this is where I was talking about that whole kind of assumed risk. If the planned game theme is guts and slash horror or end of the world serial killers, then okay. If it's written there, they understand. The next line is probably one of my favorites on this whole thing, because it's for at least for American audiences, it is an extremely easy way for me to go, all right, I know where my mind is. If this game were a movie, its movie rating would be G, PG, PG-13, R, NC-17, or other. Now, the only other that I can think of is like porno film, and I can't imagine running Porno the role-playing game. That seems off to me. But just the general use of movie ratings gives me an idea where I can set my limitations. Yeah, there's some wiggle room, but like if all of the group comes back with PG-13 circled, and one guy has got like an NC-17, bring it on, then I'm probably going to stick to the PG-13 concept of things, because the majority of the group doesn't need me to get into the adult stuff. If everybody circles R and one guy circles G, I'm probably going to ask the person who circled G, are you fooling around? Are you being serious? Like, you want this to be a kid, like a kid's game, or were you saying that you personally don't want to be involved in any adult stuff, because that's going to be quite a different atmosphere. And then, so now we get into the checklist part of the checklist, and this is, I think, where is probably the best information comes from. So each section, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 sections that have. There are 5 sections that have the green, yellow, red boxes. And each one of these sections has some additional lines on it. So if something you need to be like, we'll get to it. All right. So basically, for every single topic that's on in these sections, there you are to check either green, yellow, or red. If you check green, not only do you give enthusiastic consent, but you want this. Like this is if it's in the if you this kind of stuff will in fact it, I'm not saying that like you're all for it, but this sort of these aspects of stories do not bother you in any way, shape, or form, and that you are totally on board with having that as part of the plot or part of a scene or whatever. If you check yellow, it says it's okay, or if it's okay, it's okay if it's veiled or off stage. It might be okay on stage, but maybe requires some discussion ahead of time that you're not really sure, And this is the kind of thing that you may want to like if you're like, uh, I might not be okay with this, then you check it. If you're not sure, either if you do not have a black or white reference or a instance of nope, I am not okay with it, or yeah, I'm fine with it, whatever. Check yellow. Yellow is probably going to be the best place for you to line in if you're even remotely not sure. And then red. Red is your hard line. This is the if this is included in the game, I at least in that scene or in that session or in that instance, I will not be having a good time. And I really, really, really do not want it to be part of my gaming experience. And so then it goes through a whole lot of pre-written things. So like there's the horror section. The horror section has things like, I'm just gonna read them off. It's got bugs, blood, demons, eyeballs, gore. Now, keep in mind, blood and gore are different. Blood is going to be just basically like people are bleeding, or there's blood in cups, blood, that sort of thing. Gore is going to be more visceral. It's going to be organs. It's going to be splatter. It's not just the substance. It's actually the delivery as well. Harm to animals, harm to children, rats, spiders. And then there's a handful of empty lines. So like if there's something that you are very specifically like, oh my God, no, I have an unnatural fear of zombies. Like I wake up in the middle of the night terrified that zombies are going to break in my window. Please do not go into detail talking about zombies. Then you write zombies and you put a little check either in the yellow if you're like, I can handle it on some days. Red if you're like, please, dear God, no, zombies will make me poop my pants. Next section is relationships. And there's two sections for relationships. There's the romance section, and then there's the sex section. Romance, basically, there's the general of do you want romance in your games? Then there's the fade to black. As fade to black means as soon as things start to get romancy, scene closes, and then we open back up and the romance is over, but we know we have been informed, basically we know what happens. There's the explicit. This is where the game master is going to be very specific and tell you what's been going on. Like you're gonna get the blow by blow. Between PCs and NPCs. That is very specific because there is not, aside from the game master setting up these personalities that your PCs are going to be romantic with, there's no other exchange. The last one in the romance section is between PCs. This is where things sometimes can get sticky, and where I think asking players, are you okay with the players at the table, their characters getting romantic, becoming intimate with one another. Then we have all those same things, those same fade to black, explicit, between PCs, NPCs, between PCs, in a sex section. And now the sex section is very much like this is not a romance. This is not us, fade to black as we clink our glasses in front of the campfire. This is Dun 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 dun. Wow, wow. Remember I said porno the RPG? These are the relationship situations that people are asking about. Social and cultural issues. This is the next big section. And in here, these are things that um, I do know for a fact that a lot of role-playing games deal with. And sometimes it can bother some folk. So things like here are the lines we have written down. We have the homophobia, racism, real world religions. Now you won't run into that nearly as much in like a D&D atmosphere, but like things like Vampire, which takes place in a real world, Call of Cthulhu, um, where you might have depictions of real world religions. You might be like, I don't want that, please. Sexism, again, a lot of Call of Cthulhu games are set in a time where sexism was a little rampant. Misogyny was a big deal. Um, and if you are the kind of gamer that's like, I don't want that at the table, I want all of our females to be strong females, and I don't want that guy to call me a stupid dame or be like, get back in the office and get me coffee because all the secretaries are ladies. If they're not okay with it, either adjust your world or adjust the scenes so they're not having to deal with that, because maybe that's something they deal with on a regular day. What if their boss is the sexist jerk and they don't want to come back to your role playing table and go, oh God, more sexist jerks? Don't do it. That's what this is for. And then specific cultural issues. That'd probably be, you have to get into this specific. Now, the real big one, the two big ones for me that I think, especially in fantasy games, can easily get overlooked are racism and sexism. Because it's real easy to. I mean, I did it when I wrote Seventh Crown. There are races that are being downtrodden by others, and I think that from my perspective as a writer and as a designer, that is something that happens in real world tribalism and real world stuff. And for me as a writer, I would never want to just gloss over that and be like, oh yeah, no, racism doesn't happen in this world. But what this is saying is, if you are just like, I cannot stand to be reminded about all the racism, and please don't just hammer it home, then as a game master, I may have to adjust how I deliver that. Or maybe we adjust, slightly adjust the narrative, whatever the case may be, to make my players happy. But again, this falls also under that whole planned game theme, is that if your players are sitting down at a game and they know that your world has this already set up, then maybe they should talk to you and figure out a nice common ground, figure out where that is. Because if they're just going to hardline it and be like, nope, you cannot have racism in your game in any way, shape, or form because it makes me crazy because it exists in the real world, then you should know that trying to run for that player. And that player should know that the world that they're in has that involved. Because it could be, and I hate to say this, it could be this particular gaming session, this particular gaming group isn't for them. Maybe it's time to run a different game in a different world that they can be a part of, that's not going to be an issue. Next section is mental and physical health. Now, these, I think, it comes down to whether or not the players want to be reminded that this stuff exists, or whether or not, because I know there's been instances, when we get down to the bottom, I'll actually point, I will point out something that I would personally check as a yellow. Mental and physical health, cancer, claustrophobia, freezing to death, gaslighting, genocide, heat stroke, natural disasters, paralysis or physical restraint, police or police aggression, pregnancy, miscarriages, or abortions, I know that's a big trigger for a lot of players um, that may have had to deal with that as a attempted parent or a parent that others might not ever know about. And so that I think that that's a very important thing to put on there. That if you don't want that to be part of the game or to be discussed because it brings up hard stuff, then that's exactly what this form is for. Self harm, severe weather, sexual assault. Again, very big. A lot of old fantasy tropes. A lot of my character's history is, well, this barbaric creature raped my mother, and here I am. Uh, I think that there are different ways of delivering that story without being like rape, rape, rapey, rape, because you don't know. You don't know as a player or as a game master um, what kind of awful stuff you might be scratching the surface of. So that again, I can't see where someone thinks this is a bad idea unless you are just determined to be like, I don't want my players to ever tell me what to do. And it's just not good game mastering, in my opinion. Starvation, terrorism, thirst, and then torture. Well, technically, torture is before thirst, but I wanted to stop on torture. Um, so torture falls under a lot of different categories, but I have been in lots of D&D games and a couple of Game of Thrones games, and I've been in lots of games where the players or a character decides that the only way to get the answers that they need is through torture. And in all of the games that I have been in where we have to sit through it as players, it is not only uncomfortable, but as a player, I feel like I'm being robbed of time where we could be doing constructive things because everybody knows that torture doesn't really work. And if the game master wants to give us that information, they will. And if the game master wants us to not get that information, the person who's being tortured is going to be tight-lipped and is probably going to die in the process. It is a fast way for us to just and get to the end of it and be like, all right, slam the door. We hear some ooh no, and open the door and the guy goes, all right, he had nothing. He had nothing that he could tell me. Or oh, all right, I know where the bandits live. I personally don't need to be part of that. I don't need to be part of that scene. That's it's just not my thing. And then there's a section for additional topics. And now this is stuff that if, as a player, you go, I am crazy hydrophobic. Please don't have me in a situation where we fall off a boat or we're stranded in the ocean or something like that, because I will freak out and it will make me unhappy. Check. And then the final thing is, do you want the GM to follow up with you to clarify any of these responses? If so, which ones? And now that's basically the part of the checklist that says, I checked this and it might seem weird that I am a hard line against thirst. Okay, you're super anti thirsts. Okay, we're playing Dark Sun. It's a desert world, so I need to find out more about this. So I think that there's a lot of room there to use this as a great way of making making your games as entertaining as possible without turning it into a minefield of topics that you can and cannot use. I think that it's just a helpful guide for the player and the game master and the other players to collectively understand what is going to be the most entertaining for their game. And that's what this whole consent thing is. Is again, I think that a few buzzwords and a few instances that are a little on the heavy-handed in wording. Aside from those, this little booklet is a fantastic way of knowing the best ways to hopefully put together the narrative and the sessions for you and your gamers so you guys can always have a good time. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want everybody to have a good time. I do believe that me as a professional nerd and a game master that does a lot of convention work and a lot of running sessions for strangers, I think that this is going to be something that's probably going to be part of my character packets from here on out. Um, and that's not to say that I'm like, walking on eggshells because I don't want my players to be, upset at me for what I'm going to be running. I think it's more along the lines of I want everybody at the table to walk away smiling, whether or not their characters uh, had to, delve into some nastiness, or if they got murdered by the dragon at the end of the session. I want everybody smiling. And I think that this is going to be a way to do that. And I think if you're even remotely concerned with your gamers, with your players or whatnot, being worried about what you do as a game master, pop over to Monte Cook, download this, and you know you hand it out to them, and even if they start coming back with you, what consent? Well, I don't need no consent forms. Then you look at them and go, if you don't, then you don't. But I'd like to take a few minutes to understand if there's anything that you're not cool with. And frankly, if your players or a player is so set in their way that they refuse to play in a game that consent is necessary, then maybe we need to take a look at something a little deeper, because we sign sometimes blindly terms and conditions for websites, for app games, for everything we do. That's really all this kind of is a terms and conditions form that has some malleability to it, so your players can hopefully have the best game for them, and so you can run the best game for them, and so they will then leave your table smiling, come back smiling, and hope to play another game again. And that's really all we're trying to do here. So, next week we'll take a look at something maybe a little less heavy, but either way, I'm excited to keep making these characters and get things written up for Dragonfall. And take a look at all the links and such in the description. As always, share the video with your friends. Do your drop your likes and your comments and subscriptions and things below. And more than anything, go out there, have a good time, and play some games, because that's what we're here for. See you next week.